it down. Come the Hounds trying to house this one, and they do!
I'm James English, and as usual, I'm joined with Chicago Hounds head coach Chris Latham. And welcome back to season 3 of the Big Dawg pod. Today we are joined with Chicago Hounds owner Peter Bernick. Welcome, Peter.
Thank you.
And USA Eagle number 507 and Hounds general manager Will Magie.
Thank you for having me, James.
Well, let's a lot happened over the last 6 months, but let's have a moment to kind of reflect on last season. I think to begin with, Will, didn't finish as you would have planned, but you know what were your reflections? Now you've had a bit of time to sit back and...
Yeah, it was obviously a devastating end. Extremely close another year. Same opponent, unfortunately. But yeah, we've kind of just flipped the switch, focused our attention moving forward, and Chris and all the coaches coming back for their second year and hoping to go a couple steps better.
How important is that continuity from a coaching perspective? Obviously, Chris came in, had a huge impact, Noel and Todd as well. From your perspective, how much does that make your job easier? Yeah,
it does, because again, they know the landscape, they know what we're working with in terms of the facility, in terms of the league, in terms of each other. And they've just been itching to like get back here and get going. So I think we're primed for an awesome start to the season. We need to start fast with obviously some of the changes in the league that I'm sure we'll get into, but they're we've hit the ground running. So really excited.
Peter, we stood next to each other when we saw that kick hit the post. What have you learned from the experience?
I don't know that I could say I've learned a lot from the experience. It was obviously heartbreaking. I think first thing for me is that you quickly realize it's not about you. The players were much more gutted than we were, but was really pleased with the way everyone kind of rallied around Chris. And, you know, it was a great year. We thought we were good enough to win it. We put a team together that I think was good enough, but it's disappointing. And, we go again.
And the Free Jacks of all teams. Will, how did that feel to see them go on and after beating us in that game, go on to win the championship for a third time in a row?
Yeah, it's obviously hard, but knowing you're that close to a team that's had success over that, sustained period of time means we're, like Peter said, we're not a million miles away. We obviously believe we have a team, we've had a team, and we have a team going forward that is good enough to win. And it just, lights that fire again that like we don't want it to happen.
I think when you look at that, they've obviously done such a great job to get to where they are, as much as it pains me to say that. But it did take them a while. They're 8 years old. They're there in their 8th season. It took them a while to build and get to the point where they could go and win 3 in a row. We've kind of had that time now, I think, to really look at like what we're about, to put down to grow from something from where we were nothing to where we want to be. Where are we on that journey?
We're obviously a step further than last year. We'll see where we come in June, but like we'd like to think that we're getting closer every year. Like you mentioned, Free Jacks have been around for a while. They've had their struggles to get where they got to, and hopefully we'll put them back into their struggle era.
True. Peter, a long off season this year, lots of change. How's that been from a management perspective and ownership?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a hard year. It's been a hard year for the league. Anytime you lose teams, it's hard. It's hard on the players. It's hard on their fans. The ownership groups that we lost, they were committed. They were good owners. They were good partners. It's just a very hard thing to build this. And, we're in our 4th year. Miami was in a shorter timeline than us, but groups like Houston and New Orleans have been here for longer than us. And, you feel for the community and you feel for kind of the rugby ecosystem in the U.S., but this happens in sports. It happens all the time. I read something that there were 2 of the original 34 NFL teams have made it to today. Obviously, we don't want to go through anything like that, but it's a challenge, and I think we're in a good spot. We have 6 really good teams that are committed, and I look at this as a foundation year. We have to grow from here, obviously, but I think the MLR is in kind of a best case scenario with the 6 that we have. And, we've shortened the season and look, it's arguable as to whether, we're in a better spot than we were last year, but I do think we're in a strong place. And I think we have a chance to build from here. And if this becomes kind of the floor or the foundation, then I think that's a good thing for the league. And we've done some stuff business-wise that I think sets us up well. Obviously, Sunday Night Rugby on ESPN is a huge kind of thing for the sport. It'll be the first time that we've seen this much continuity. And so hopefully we build from there.
We've gone from 13 teams 5 years ago to 6 teams now. You're saying it's a growth year now, a real opportunity to kind of reset a little bit. What is different going into this season than where we were this time last year?
Well, I think that the setup of the league and the way we've built the league office gives us a chance to grow from here. I think 13 I would love to have 13, but it needs to be the right 13. We're 4 years out from a World Cup instead of 8 when we started, so it's a little bit closer. I think, by the time we kick off next year, you'll see, we'll be the next World Cup, right? Or shortly thereafter. So we need expansion teams. We're working hard on it. There's some whispers about teams that are coming in. We'd love to get to 8 next year. I think would be a reasonable goal and to build from there. But no one says they want to go from 12 or 13 to 6, but it's happened throughout the history of this sport and others. And, we do our part and we lead from the front and do everything we can to kind of build the league and be good stewards of the sport. And, hopefully come, the next 4 or 5 years, you see a lot of growth and a really, really good product, which I think the product hasn't been the problem. It's just a very expensive sport to own and operate. And, it takes patience and vision. And, I think I'm proud of what we built here. I'm proud of what the league has done. And I don't begrudge anyone who's made the call not to be a part of this. It is extremely expensive, but look, it's a great game and it's our job to keep bringing it forward.
You talked about expansion. Is there a difference between sustainability and expansion? Are they connected or can they exist separately?
I'd rather have the right 6 than the wrong 8. But I do think there are markets that are interested. I do think that we can get from 6 to 8 to 10 to 12, I think is a reasonable goal, come 31. And you're seeing it in soccer in particular. The USL is having huge growth. There's, markets coming up, the women's side as well. So I think you have to want to grow and expand. I think if you aren't, you're standing still. We obviously can't go backwards from here, right? Like the 6 is, I think, the bare minimum to have a professional league. And but it's a good 6. And if we have a great season and, we put a good product on the field, I think there will be demand.
You put a huge amount of time, effort, emotion, and money into this. What was it like to see those teams kind of disappear and the league change?
I get it, I guess, but it's frustrating. And everyone has their own reasons. And I would never kind of begrudge anyone for making a financial decision. And frankly, all of those groups put, huge dollars into this over the years. And look, we have to grow more. Like this is not a sustainable model if we aren't growing. And that needs to be at the team level, the league level, the quality of play level, the quality of production. We need our buildings to be more full. And, all we can do is really control Chicago and try to raise the standard everywhere else. But yeah, of course it's frustrating. You'd rather have, the same 11 and maybe one more this year. But, we'll be okay. And I think we'll figure out how to grow from here.
We spend so much time and effort focusing on our own market and Chicago and doing the best we can to grow the game here and also give a great product. And sometimes we're so reliant upon other groups. You talk a lot about the MLR and the changes there for the good. What are they? Like, why are we looking in a position now where we think the MLR is in a better position from a kind of a staff point of view?
Look, I don't think that we were in a bad position on a staffing point of view or anything. I do think it was time for like a leadership change. I think Nick Benson did an amazing job. He's a close friend. I think the world of the effort that he's put in, and he's kind of worn a million hats in this league. But to get 2 guys in Graham and Alex, who both have experience at the league level. Graham's done more internationally. Alex has been with the Free Jacks for a long time. I just think we needed a new blood. And I think we need a new enthusiasm and to try some different things. And look, those guys are deeply committed to rugby and to the MLR. And so I think that's like kind of the easy side on the leadership. I think the other side is that from a business standpoint, we've created an operating agreement that allows for expansion to be easier. We finished the CBA, which was hanging over us for a year. And, I think we're the first professional rugby union in the U.S. And, look, I think that was a hard process, but one that I'm glad is in the rear view. And so we're just trying to make sure that what we have now is expandable and growable. I think what the MLR had when we came in was a little bit less secure in terms of kind of what you owned and what you operated. And so we had to kind of learn from our mistakes and make sure we didn't replicate them.
I think even from our end, on a daily operating basis, we've seen much more support probably from the league this year around best practice, teams being more collaborative about working together. I think it's a lot easier when there are less teams to be able to do that. I know from a CEO point of view, we've already sat down with other CEOs and we've talked about what's worked well and what hasn't. Will, with all this going on in the background, your job is obviously focused more around the on-field product. 6 months of uncertainty. There were times where we wondered whether we'd be sitting here now talking about the 2026 season, but here we are, fortunately, because of people like Peter. But on your end, how do you go about kind of motivating your on-field staff, the players, kind of returning players? What did that look like for you?
Yeah, it was a lot of patience to begin with, right? And with first and foremost, with the staff that we knew we would be bringing back if and when there was a season, and trying to manage their expectations and being that buffer. Like, both of you were fantastic with me of providing the information that I needed to know, but not, overdoing or underdoing it, but also making sure I had the information to be able to plan and put things in place for the upcoming season. And then with the coaches, they just want to be here and on the ground and coaching. So, when there was initial rumors about the shortened season and all of those sort of things, like, I think that was initially like a bit of a hard one to swallow for them, because 2 months less of, de facto work on the ground. So yeah, it was just, again, trying to be as open with them as you both were with me, but also trying to protect too much information necessarily getting out there that, at the time may have been on like a need to know basis based on where we were at in the proceedings of the bigger and wider picture of the league. So.
Well, the challenge of this as well is it wasn't like there was a deadline where we all of a sudden knew that how many teams we had, what the team structure looked like for the league. This happened over a process of 3 or 4 months. Mm-hmm. It was an ever-changing environment that we were adapting to at the time and trying to make the best of to almost predict where we would end up, and where we are now probably wasn't even what we thought 3 months ago. But again, feeling fortunate, excited about that. From a recruiting point of view, what are the changes from last year? What can we expect to see from the roster? I saw one of the stats that said we had the most returning players, and we've always talked about, especially with Peter, and how important not having too much changes. What's that been like for you?
Yeah, it's been an amazing experience. Obviously, it's my first off season, really getting an opportunity to do that. I think that what you touched on there with the teams that are no longer with us, it wasn't like we had a certain date where all 4 or 5, however many it was in the end, just were like, okay, we're out. It was like, one here, a couple there. Utah was very last minute. So in terms of trying to put a plan together to like recruit the best players from all of those different teams, it's difficult, right? We started, and I say we because it was a very collaborative effort, that we started with, okay, who on our squad based on the new parameters of the league were non-negotiable that we had to have back in the building. Again, we've talked about this, that we felt like we were been pretty close the last couple of years, certainly last year. So we don't need to reinvent the wheel. Obviously, like the work we've done over the past couple of years has established a great core of players here. So we started there. I think we have 16 returning out of our total squad of 33. So a really good foundation, both leadership, experience in Chicago, knowing what it takes. I think we still have 4 OG Hounds from year 1, if I'm correct, in Whitey, Basker, or maybe not, was Basker?
Mac Jones.
Yep. Macca and Charlie, which is awesome. So they've had that experience of where we were day 1 to now and that growth. And then obviously some big veteran, leaders in our squad coming back. Lucas Rumble, Mason Flesh, Chris Hilsenbeck, Ollie Devoto, like guys like that, which are, key stalwarts for us. Once we had that core, it was like, right, what's available? We knew there's going to be a big focus on the domestic talent. So we really started there. Who was available from those different teams? Who could we get in? And that's where the likes of Ruben De Haas, Tavita Lepetti, Emmanuel Albert, Malcolm May, guys that have been in the league for a long time that we feel can come in and bring experience from those other teams and help us in our quest for the Shield. And then finally, it was about sort of like the little sprinkles on top of those foreign spots, and who was available. not just like all around the world, but also like who is in the league already that knows what it takes, knows what the league's like, don't have to necessarily deal with like the whole uncertainty of a visa process in our, everything going on in the world and government and, at the moment. So yeah, that was kind of like a little bit of the thought process behind there that led to the guys like Brock Webster and Santiago Videa and joining us. So
you talked about 4 names there that have been here since day one. How much do those guys kind of capture what we're about as Chicago Hounds, and why is that a key part of our identity to have guys like that coming back?
Yeah, I think they all have their sort of unique personalities, obviously, but one thing that you look across all 4 of those guys that were here from day one is like you won't find people that will work harder than them necessarily. Someone like Luke White, who's played, I think, maybe every position in the forward pack, and he's maybe capped at a couple of those for the US, which is, again, shows a phenomenal commitment to his trade, right? To like learn and understand and work hard at that. Charlie Abel, again, one of the toughest, hardest, and then most lovable guys off the field. Again, what we sort of stand for is that like work hard, city of big shoulders mentality, but then treating people well, being kind, being out in the community, doing all that sort of work as well. So like they're 2 sort of, small examples there of the type of people we want in the building and the type of people that we think is good for the rugby, but good for the organization too.
Peter, 3 of those 4 not born in Chicago, actually all Australian or Australian born. Why for you do they kind of represent good representations of Chicago?
Yeah, I think the beauty of sport is that where you're from kind of matters less than what jersey you've worn. And we've tried to build kind of the character of this squad around guys like that. Both versatility and toughness and leadership. We've lost, Bryce Campbell, who was with us for 3 years. We lost Dylan Fawcett, who was with us for 2 years. And like those are going to be voids in the building. But at the same time, I think we've replaced those guys the best we can with other leaders. And I think we've also been really lucky in that we've had young guys that have come in and we've developed. And I think that's the hardest thing in emerging sport and in a small league is to give kind of young talent a chance. But guys like Noah and Peyton and others that we've kind of developed as we've gone and, to fold in, veteran talent around them and leadership with guys who've been with us from the beginning. Like, you think about Mark O'Keefe or you think about Michael Baska, like those guys have done a million different things for us and they've played out of position, they've played hurt. And so I think that kind of culture and ethos comes through. And then, look, Lucas Rumble is one of the best leaders that I've been around in anything, sport or otherwise. And, guys like him and Charlie, like they make other people want to run through walls. So I think we live in Chicago. We need to be tougher than everybody. We need to be physical. And I think we've tried to recruit a roster based on that for 4 years. And I think we're getting better at it, all the time. And I think people want to play here. I think we provide them kind of a best-in-class experience, whether it's the stadium, how we feed them, the things we try to do for their families. And, that's how we want to be. Like we want to be a place that if people have a choice, Chicago's on that list. And I think that's helped us recruit a lot.
Will talked about domestic players being more valuable this year. That's obviously based around the new rule that it's 7 international spots from 10 last year. Pete, you were on the board who made that decision. What was the thought process behind reducing the amount of international spots this year?
Yeah, it was not just the reduction in slots, but kind of unfortunately to our detriment, removing Canadians from kind of the domestic player pathway. It was not a unanimous, everybody thinks this is the exact way to go decision. I've kind of come around on it. I do think that our job is to grow the domestic game in the U.S. I think we are stewards of the national team. I think we want USA Rugby to be as good as possible. But it's hard. I don't feel any better about somebody who's U.S. eligible versus somebody who's born in the U.S. versus somebody who's not. And they've all given up their kind of homelands, their lives, their careers to play for us. And so we're just going to live within the rules, right? Like we're going to build the best roster that we can and, hopefully lead a bunch of Hounds onto that U.S. national team in the World Cup, both this year and in 31. But look, these are hard choices. And so when you go from 10 to 7 and you remove Canadians from the player pool, that's just the law of supply and demand, and you guys probably have better data on this than I do, but I can't think of that many players that weren't MLR players that are on rosters this year. Like you really haven't had to go outside of the MLR to fill these rosters. And so I think it's going to lead to a really competitive season. I think all 6 teams can beat anyone on any day. I think it's flattened the curve a little bit in terms of kind of where the talent sits, but hopefully on the margins we have advantages simply by having the continuity at both like the leadership in the office, on the staff, and and in the players. So that's how we built it, right? Like we wanted to have a chance to run it back. You said we took an extra step last year. We were in the semifinal the year before in Boston. Like, let's host the game this year. Like that's the next step, right? To not have to travel to Quincy, for a playoff game, and then we're hosting the final. So we're in a great spot there if we can kind of reach our expectations.
On that, I think we all agree that for rugby and for MLR to continue to grow, the success of the national team is really important, especially as we come up to the next World Cup and obviously the host World Cup in 31 and 33. In hindsight, having lost some teams, reducing the amount of international spots does give the domestic talent more opportunity to build rosters. And there's going to be some guys who unfortunately probably missed out on contracts this year. But Will, how important is that for you? You've been an Eagle, you've played at World Cups, you're now in a position where you're handing out contracts and building pathways. Like, what does that look like? Is that a big part of your focus?
Yeah, I think so. Obviously, it does mean a lot to me. I want to see the US team do well, compete at that tier 1 level, compete at the World Cup. I know Scott and the team have, grand plans to sort of shock the world and do all of that in 2031. It's going to take a lot of, resources and a lot of good people in the right spots, which we do have, and a lot of opportunities for those domestic guys. I think when it comes back to the Hounds, we have sort of gone through a little bit of a changing of the guard almost, where we've tried to bring in some of these younger American players, whereas a lot of the guys that were our Eagle representatives in the last couple of years have probably been the guys that are towards the back end of their international career. Some of the guys you mentioned, obviously, Dylan, Bryce, Nate Augsburger, Paddy Ryan, those sort of guys. So whereas if we're looking at who the guys we've recruited this year, Brandon Harvey, 23-year-old second row, Nathan Denhu, 28-year-old second row as well, who's going to be around for hopefully a number of years now, eligible for the US, Ruben De Haas, Tavit Lepetti. So that's really exciting. And if we can help contribute really good players in our really good environment, that when they go and represent the Eagles, they're doing it proudly representing Chicago, that's really cool. And then I think the second part to that is with the condensed talent pool and the domestics across 6 teams, not 12 or 13 or 11, however many it has been in the years gone by, you get like an opportunity for kind of organically, but combinations to start to form a little bit more easily. So, for example, we've got Ruben De Haas and Chris Hilsenbeck, 9-10. Like that's a very realistic international halfback combination there that Scott Lawrence hopefully is looking at, leading up to the 2027 World Cup. Similarly with the, 3 of the second rows, we have Nathan Denhout, Thomas Caceres and Brandon Harvey. Like you start to formulate those partnerships, it can be really powerful. And I know that's something that Scott is really keen on, and sort of having, specific position groups that do get time in the saddle together, 9s and 10s, centers pairings, front row, tight fight, like that sort of thing. So it'll be interesting to see how that sort of pans out over the next couple of years with sort of the reduced teams. But yeah, we'll help wherever we can. But obviously our ultimate goal is to win with Chicago. And if they can sort of go hand in hand, then that's best case scenario. And
I think Scott and his team are being more collaborative than ever with the MLR teams. I know that he, regular conversations with the likes of you and even myself and Chris Latham as well around how players are getting on and what he wants from players and how that fits in with what we're trying to do. Peter, from a board level, it's tough because obviously we know how important it is for the national team to be successful. How many times, when you're talking about the development of the league itself, does that come up as a conversation? Is that a focus, or is the focus primarily on MLR and making that a successful entity?
It has to be both, right? I mean, I think MLR is the primary focus for us for sure. We're the ones investing in it. I think what's been hard, at the USA rugby level is that with this many teams and players spread out, you almost look at our roster last year and the Free Jacks roster last year, they really prepared Canada better for a World Cup run than the US was able to by splitting, the same player pool across 11 teams as opposed to largely 2. But But the World Cup needs to be a catalyst for growth in the sport, and it's going to be. It's going to be a massive event, and we need to be positioned to kind of benefit from that. And the last thing we want is for the U.S. team to be, not competitive in that World Cup. And so, my math is that there's 96 U.S. eligible players that'll be on game day 23s. If assuming everyone uses 7, those players will get to play together. They will get minutes together, and the best countries in the world often have less teams competing at their professional level. I mean, Ireland has 4 URC teams. Leinster runs out a huge percentage of that club, and they play together for years. And we've not been able to do that as a league. It's not traditional in the U.S. to have that in sports, but rugby is a different game. And so we think about it, but in the end, like, our focus has to be on generating revenue, and the way to do that is by putting, fans in seats. And the best way to do that is with great product and good buildings. And I like where we're at. I think it's going to be a good year in that focus. I think, hopefully with 10 games that creates like a real ramp to what we're doing in the future. But look, it's a risk. Anytime you get smaller, I wish we had more teams and more games, but we'll do it with what we got to.
Well, you say that, and we're obviously down to from 90 odd games to 33 games this year. What are the opportunities and challenges that come with that?
There's plenty. 30 is a really short regular season. But we're playing games in time slots for the most part now. Like, if you turn on your TV on Sunday evening, you're going to be able to watch rugby on ESPN2. It's never happened before. We'll have more national games this year than we've had, combined in previous years, and on a network where people are just going to naturally gravitate towards watching sports. So I like our chances to use this year as a marketing and advertising tool for the future. But it comes down to us and to making sure that it isn't viewed as a less than product than we've seen before because it's smaller. Most people who are watching a Major League Rugby game on ESPN2 probably haven't seen a lot of MLR before, right? Like, our audiences, they know where to find us if they watched on TRN or they watched on ESPN Plus. We weren't capturing a lot of fans that didn't know that the sport was on, and so we were in an echo chamber. The hope now is that people that are looking for something to watch in a period where there's really just kind of baseball for a period and then a little bit of kind of basketball and hockey, we have a chance to draw new fans. And we know that people, once they see rugby, they want to watch more. And that's what, our product is, that is our marketing tool. So hopefully 30 games, 3 playoff games, a good final, and we build from there.
I think it's a good opportunity to talk about some of the changes that you mentioned there. It's hard, when we're trying to manage the business side, there's obviously a focus on us selling tickets and getting people to come to games. There's also that challenge in trying to put together a really good media product. And while in the past our kickoffs have been all over the place, production hasn't always been consistent from team to team. And now ESPN2 coming in and saying, right, well, we've got this Sunday night rugby. It's going to be 8 p.m. Eastern time. Every Sunday there's going to be a game on. Some of our fans are going to be looking at our schedule, for example, and saying, was it a great decision to move rugby to a Sunday night? We've always successfully, we've had the most success playing Sunday afternoons traditionally. We still have one game on a Sunday afternoon, but the others, we've been fortunate to be selected by ESPN2 to have 3 home games. For those that are listening, why is it important, and where does that balance come in?
Yeah, look, it's arguable, right? Like, I think if we were running just the Chicago Hounds business and there wasn't a television component to it, we would make decisions in the best interest of our fans and our fan base and our business. But, we're partners at the league level. We need this to grow, and the best way to do that is to attract a larger audience. And while we might get 5, 6, 7,000 at SeatGeek, and we're very proud of that, the audience needs to be exponentially larger for this to succeed going forward. And so we have to do things in the best interest of the whole. It's why we want to host the final. It's why we're willing to play a game in Nashville. I am most loyal to our fans, but for our fans to be around for a decade to come, the league needs to continue to grow and our business needs to grow. And so we've been the ones who've raised our hands most often to take those added risks, right? Like, we want to prove that the model works. We want to attract new fan bases and new franchises. The best way to do that, we're targeting Nashville because it's a World Cup host city. They want to host a game. We're playing at a phenomenal stadium. I think we'll bring an entirely new audience into that game and people that haven't seen professional rugby before. And, that's how I've led, from the beginning. We hosted a final in our first year. Like, we were 3-13. We weren't a threat to play in that game. And yet, it just felt like we're going to raise our hands and we're going to try to raise this to a different level, and we'll do it again, and we'll do it going forward. I mean, that's the only way I know how to build a business, is to take some risks.
And I think if we were just to sit back in our comfort zone and do what's easy, this will never work, right? So we've always said, let's go out there, let's be great, let's do the things, let's take chances. Hosting the final year one, Nashville this year, hosting the final again this year as well. Like, exciting stuff. What does that do around the staff and players? Like, hosting the final this year, Will, is that an extra push or motivation for them?
I think it is, personally, and I know Chris Latham does, and that's why we got in front of it sort of day one and said, here's the final. It's out on that field. We want to be playing in that game, right? Like, yes, you could argue like that puts more pressure on, but good friend of mine always says pressure makes diamonds. So,
is that what he says?
something like that.
I thought it was pressure's a privilege.
Pressure's a privilege. Pressure's for tires, one of those things. But no, it's an awesome opportunity, and it's something we should strive towards. That, yeah, we want to play a home semi, and we have the right to play a home final if we are good enough to be there, which, we're all working very, very hard around the clock to make sure that we are there.
Yeah, and we don't want to host that game for somebody else. So I think
it would be a different
the motivation's
experience.
pretty high.
It would be a different feeling than year one, right?
To make sure that feels like a Hounds home game that we're in.
Yeah.
And one of the things I think that's been so successful for us is how our fans have really embraced rugby in Chicago. Like, we talked about Dogtown. These guys come in, men and women come in, they're raucous, they really get behind the team. They make it a really tough environment for opposing teams to come in. And I would hate for them to think that by us taking the route of looking at the media aspect of the business is not looking after those guys. In saying that, we've sold more season tickets so far this year than we ever done before. There's an argument to say, the pushing the season a little bit later has meant that some of those snow games that we've had in the past where we've struggled to sell tickets because it's such a hard environment to come and watch sports isn't going to happen. When we look at like the Hounds fans in particular, what stood out for you over the last kind of 3 seasons?
I just love how many of them we see game to game. It's not a new audience every week. It grows. Our home playoff game last year was phenomenal. Like, that was by far the best event that we've put on. We played well. We had a big crowd. It was a beautiful night. That was the step from the year before. The year before we had to go to New Orleans and win a playoff game, which was great. But to show our fans that level of rugby and to get them to embrace our players. And look, I think our staff and players are what makes our fans want to keep coming back. Like, it's one thing to go to a rugby game. It's another thing to know that you get to get on the field afterwards and your kids can grab a ball and kick it through the posts. And it's the opportunity that exists by how small we are, and we can make it very intimate and kind of powerful. And we didn't force anything on our fans. It's very organic the way they've built it, whether it's the tailgate or kind of the howling or whatever is going on in the crowd. That is really what it means to be at Dogtown. We're not pumping in noise or telling them what to do. They've built that kind of organic, supporters group feel. And all we want to do is invite them back and have them bring their friends and then have them want to come back again. And look, I wish we had 8 games and I wish we were playing exactly at the times we want to. But we have to make the best of where we are. And frankly, it's 4 games and it's Sunday. So there's no youth rugby, youth sports. Like, I actually think we'll do okay, as long as we don't end up in like another, Chicago winter night or something like that. But look, I expect good crowds. I don't think it's an excuse for us. We certainly can't afford to rely on everything being perfect to work. And so, but we're ready. I mean, our staff is here and our players are back, and I think we'll do fine.
You mentioned the Supporters Club. Big shout out to the Kennel Club. We met them recently to talk about, we meet them kind of twice a year to talk about some feedback on their end and what they're looking for and how we can improve that fan experience. Well, what are the, how does that impact the rugby side of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, you want to have the loudest, biggest crowd cheering you on our Sunday games. That's home field advantage, right? Like, that's that's what we strive for. That's who we're putting on these performances for. And there's nothing like, feeling like you have that extra man on the field because there are actually 5,000 in the stands cheering every move. I think we have an incredible supporters base. Like you've talked about, we've got more season tickets sold this year than ever. I think roughly 25% of those have activated the free ticket option to go down to Nashville, which is a 7-hour drive, which is, for us here in the Midwest now, that's nothing, but for other people around the country is crazy. And again, they're just so bought in, and they're so bought in because of the things that yourself and Peter have mentioned, that it's all happened organically. Like we don't force the signing autographs on the players after the game, or taking the photos, or spending time talking to someone that's come to the first game. It just sort of happens organically. And again, that's just, that's who we want to have as people that are associated with the Hounds players, staff, but also our fans. Like we love the fact that they are our fans, right? So we can't wait. We've got obviously some amazing season ticket holder events coming up, which will be awesome too. And yeah, we're just going to make the most of those 4 opportunities at home, the game in Nashville, and then hopefully a home semi and a home final to make it special for our fans.
And no pressure, but it has been probably easier to sell tickets when we're winning, Will. So hopefully we can keep the team going there. You mentioned the CBA earlier, not something we're going to go into in too much detail. Spearheaded by the Iceman and ex-Chicago Hound Chris Mattina, I'd like to add. But Will, how has that changed from our operating procedure around players? What benefits will we see with the players, and kind of as we move forward off the back of that?
I think going forward in seasons to come, like massive benefits, because it's now that for the first time ever, there are minimum standards, right? That like every club, every organization has to adhere to. And that trickles down from, number of meals per week, but also to how many dollars are going into a player's bank account, right? Which is super important. From my perspective, it allows it to be very clear, black and white. Like here are the rules and the regulations that we are now participating under. And, we're all 6 teams currently, hopefully 8 in the future, all have the same sort of, hymn sheet, for want of a better phrase, to work off. Right. So in my mind, it actually kind of makes my job easier knowing that these are the rules, these are the regulations. I think from a player standpoint, it's a phenomenal achievement what those guys have done. Obviously, Chris, there's a handful of other player reps from each team to be the first group that's pulled that off for the players in the league. And yeah, there have been changes though, and there have been challenges with that. Obviously, like it's a long process, and I think it was ratified a week or so ish prior to the season or report date commencing. So that in itself has we've had to pivot and we've had to make some adjustments. But it's exciting, and I think, like I said, going forward, it's going to create a healthier, more sustainable, and really competitive league, because salary cap is what it is, and you now have to find competitive advantages around not just monetary value, or not just where people can live or what cars they can drive or these types of things. It's more around, what your staff is like, what you can offer them in the building, where that is in your location, like all these small things that really matter when it comes to like recruitment and arguably more important, like retention.
And how important is it from your end to have that collaborative approach with players?
Look, I think a lot of credit goes to those guys for, 1, coming to the table, and 2, getting a deal done. Often these things take much longer, especially for CBAs. When you think of all of the changes just in terms of number of jobs and number of teams, there was real concern that like this might not get done. And so, huge credit to both the negotiating sides on both parties. I was pretty far removed from it, which is how these negotiations should be, because you don't want to get emotional. But I think our players know how well we take care of them, or want to, in Chicago. And, I think that having a set of kind of uniform standards and rules is important as we grow, more than maybe for right now. But it'll be an iterative process, right? Like these agreements are not, evergreen. And look, we want our players to make more money, right? That means we're making more money. There's better revenues. And so realistic approaches on both sides, but just really thrilled we're playing rugby. And I think as, teams went down and this was all going on, there was no guarantees. But we operated as if we were going to play. I think the other 5 teams did as well. And I think that's why we were able to sign and bring players in and get medicals done. And, I think we've got a game, a week from Saturday, first game of the year. So it's here after all this time. I'm really excited.
We made it. So far, so good.
We don't have a game. The league has a game, I should say.
Right, that's it. And as we look at the past and we see that, expenses were increasing very fast around not just the rugby element, but other parts of the business. And revenue probably wasn't, going up as much as we would have liked in relation to that. As we look forward, obviously the CBA hopefully can help us with some aspects of that. But where do we think that, where is the most opportunity for us as we look forward, as we create this more sustainable, investable model?
I think we have to build amongst our 6 teams and continue to improve there. But the best opportunity we have is for the next teams to come in and raise our level as well. And so I think about kind of some of the best brands in U.S. sport out of the expansion side. So I think about, like Austin and MLS, like that was kind of came out of nowhere. And yet smaller market than a lot of their competitors, but built something, hugely tangible. And with all of these markets building these kind of bespoke rectangular stadiums, there should be an appetite, for more dates in those buildings. And so as USL builds and MLS Next builds and things like that in soccer, which, is 10 times the size of the professional rugby business, I'm hopeful that we have, 12 ready-made places where we can eventually be playing rugby. And look, SeatGeek is a wonderful facility for us. The pitch is fantastic. The amenities are great. The players get a very professional experience. But we have 26,000 seats there. Like there's no scarcity. Anyone can show up for a game any day, no matter what we're doing on season ticket sales. And that makes it hard to convince someone that they need to show up. If you're in a 6,000 or 8,000 seat stadium and it's built for rectangular sport, you have an opportunity to create demand and scarcity because you can't just walk up on game day. And so, look, it's a challenge for Chicago, but it's one that, I'd rather be in Chicago than somewhere else. But even like in Seattle and in New England, their kind of size has given them a more passionate fan base that needs to pre-plan and show up. Would I rather be in our building than those buildings? Yeah, for sure. But as we grow, I think you'll start to see kind of bespoke buildings that were meant for sports of our size as opposed to playing where an MLS team did, for example.
And I think if we're realistic and look at this and the challenges that we have, that's a really obvious one, right? I mean, we have a great relationship with SeatGeek Stadium in the village of Bridgeview. It's a fantastic stadium. But we know that Bridgeview is tough for some supporters. And, while we've been very blessed that we have so many people who will come out and support us week in, week out, and we know it's not easy. The Fire moved out of there for a reason. The Red Stars no longer play their games at Bridgeview. Will, how important going forward...
Thank you for asking this of Will.
Yeah. How important for the future of rugby is having stadiums that are more suited to rugby, both from a business side and a rugby side? Twofold,
right? One is that SeatGeek as its full facility is incredibly suited to the day-to-day running of a professional rugby team, and that's where we're so lucky in that we have, all our front office have office space there, all our coaching staff, performance staff, medical all have office space there. Players' locker room, we have our own gym, we have the ability to train indoor during the harsh winter, outdoor on an amazing grass field, stadium fields heated, all of those things. It couldn't be better, right, for a professional rugby team. But then when it comes to the game day and to Peter's point, 26,000 is a lot of seats. Probably close to being wrong here, but I think that would be bigger than any Premiership rugby stadium-ish,
yeah.
Right? So is it realistic to think that we can sell 26,000 seats where we're at right now on a week-to-week basis in season? No, we know we're not we're not there yet. So I think if you could take all those elements of the day-to-day operations of the team and then plonk it in somewhere that's, 6,000 to 8,000 seats, then you've got the best of both worlds. But until that happens, until there's a viable opportunity, like we have an amazing facility, and like Peter and yourself know, like we wouldn't change it for anything else. The fact that, some of the biggest feedback we've had from players that are new to Chicago but have been in the league for a number of years is, this is amazing that we turn up at 7 a.m. and we leave at 2 o'clock and we haven't had to leave the premises, right? Like, not naming other teams, but you'd have to go this place to do your workout. You'd have to go here, depending on which day of the week it was, to train. And then you had to get back here for a team meeting and then go here to eat. And it's just like, that in my mind is not professional rugby that we want to put out there. What we're able to do with the facility that we have is a really high standard of professional rugby. And we like to show that off too. And we like to raise the bar, and we like to, have people come in and see what we do with our space too. So I think that's really important for us to have the level of professionalism that we do.
And it's an MLS quality stadium. So, we're lucky to have that, and the fields outside, the dome means that it gives us a great flexibility in the winter. But if you look at the likes of New England and Seattle, and Mags has always talked really well about this, about the idea of, scarcity in tickets creates urgency, which means they sell out much quicker at 4,000 and 4,500. And I think what we've seen is the consumer behavior on our end means that because people know we won't sell out, they'll buy very late. We sell 30-40% of our tickets within 48 hours of the game. People may wait to see what the weather's like before they commit to going based on stuff like that, which means it's a little bit harder to sell. Peter, what do you take from stuff like that?
Look, I think it's not just the capacity, right? Like, there's a ton to do in Chicago. The weather can be up and down. The fact that we get so many repeat customers is our biggest advantage, and that's the hardest thing to do in building any sort of consumer product brand, is making sure that people like it and that they come back, and if there's an issue, that we fix it. And so I'm not suggesting that we change what we do. I think more importantly is, how do we attract new markets that have these, call it 6,000 to 12,000 seat venues that don't have 45 other things that they're competing with? And you're seeing it. There's an amazing USL story in Portland, Maine. Like, you wouldn't think that would be one of the more successful new brands in sports, but they've really created a culture for it. And you see it in the Prem, and you see it in other rugby, where it's often not in the places. It's not New York, it's not Chicago, it's not necessarily LA. There's these markets, and whether they're college football towns or they have other businesses, you can create something almost rabid in a good way in those markets. And look, I think it's going to be a long process, but I think that there will be rugby communities that grow out of the expansion that didn't exist before, but then they fall in love with the game, kind of the way that I did, right? Like, I didn't have a huge rugby background. I would rather be in Chicago than anywhere else, because as this grows, I'd rather be in a city that is made for it. We saw it with Ireland and the All Blacks. The demand is there. It's up to us to raise our levels, both at the team and the league level, that the biggest rugby fans in the world want to come to games in the U.S. And I think the World Cup will be this great catalyst for that, but it's 4 years away. Like, we have to do a lot in those 4 years to be able to, live off the back of it.
I think when we started this originally, people said, what a great place to put rugby. It's such a great sports town, Chicago. But realistically, that actually meant we're competing against 4 or 5 of the biggest sports brands in world sports. And yet, we've always prided ourselves in rugby and being like hyper-local, community-focused. Will, how can we continue to build that, and what's going to be the secret sauce in differentiating ourselves from things like USL, which is thriving at the moment and is showing great growth, and soccer's a long way ahead of where we are currently when you look at the MLS. Where are the opportunities there?
Wish I had the secret sauce.
Pay you more money.
Might be a rich man, yeah.
Me too.
I
wish you had it.
I think first and foremost, we have, I believe, really tapped into the strong rugby core here. The strong rugby core that is here in Chicago. And I think through our players going out in the community and coaching at the high school, collegiate, club level, and the amazing work that, Janet Keen's done through Imagine Rugby and Rugby Illinois and all those sort of programs, we really have done a great job at that. And not to say we've maxed that out, because we can always continue to grow that, but I feel like that's where our like core fan potentially is from, right? The rugby community. Now it's about how do we work with that core to continue to continue to grow it and to continue to bring it and have them be our biggest sort of advocates, and with a better production and people that you've talked about maybe flicking it on TV and seeing it on ESPN2 or ESPN Plus. Oh, wow, this is really professional, right? Yeah. This isn't a stream that's in a, you know, an amateur stadium and grainy, you know, footage, right? This is like legit. I want to come and be a part of that. And then when they do come and be a part of it, we give them an amazing fan experience that is so unique in sports that they just become like instantly obsessed with it. Like it, and we feel we do that, right? And it's the tailgate, but the tailgate where the non-rostered players are walking up and down and meeting the fans. Like you don't get that at a Bears game, right? You can't just have like Caleb Williams being out with a, you know, week-to-week knee injury and walking through the south lot of Soldier Field. No. It'd be pretty amazing if you could. But like, again, we can do that, right? We have all of the fans come on the field after the game and meeting the players. Like that is such a unique experience. Like you bring enough people and you have a big group through our ticketing team, you get to walk in the locker room and see the jerseys hanging up 2 hours before kickoff. You get to come out on the field with me and some of the players and watch the warm-ups. Like these are things and experiences that maybe the latter, that yes, you can have that at the Bears game, but you got to have a pretty big checkbook to be able to afford to do that, right? So like we're so attainable, we're so down to earth, we're so open just to like have fans come in and become, like I said, instantly obsessed with it, that we're willing to curate any experience that you want. All we ask in return is that you're a fan for life, and we know that will be the case.
And we've seen some big changes in the league with that. You know, the new partnership with OS Studio. We've already seen with our media day, for example, some big changes. A new production company, which hopefully is going to produce more of a consistent product across the league. And as we look towards our partnership with people like Fox Chicago, with ESPN2 now, hopefully that's only going to grow.
Yeah, I think one of the things that Will touched on is that our rugby fans, the guys who grew up playing or their families that already play, I think we've got them pretty well like captured, but they're also in some ways like our biggest critics, right? Because they want it to be so successful, and we've tried to embrace that group. And I think, you know, it's a constant process and one that we need to keep improving on. But a lot of our best kind of new fans are the ones that are the stickiest, that they feel like they're a part of something new and special that they haven't seen before. I've been lucky enough to invite a lot of friends and their families who've never seen a rugby game before, and they can't believe that this is how they get to spend their Sunday, you know, for maybe it's $100 to bring your family, you know, to a game, and they're lifelong memories. And those kids end up playing, I think, is the coolest part. Like we can't rely on the game to grow our product. We need our product to grow the game.
Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate. Well, Will, Peter, we appreciate your time and joining us. This has been the Big Dawg podcast. Buy tickets and come support us, chicagohounds.com. Up the Hounds.
Thanks, James.